Welcome, everybody. You got a nice crowd here today. It's good. We're here for another of the Gildenhorn book series, and there's no book I can think of that's more critical to understand right now as we go through our elections. Europe goes through all of what it's going through, and we all have to face the rise of Putinism in Russia. As you all know, Garry Kasparov was the world chess champion, but he's also somebody who has been very involved in geopolitics and certainly been on the side of reform and resistance to the rise of Putinism in Russia. And this is called Winter is Coming. And the title says it all, but if you don't think so, the subtitle is Why Vladimir Putin and the Enemies of the Free World Must Be Stopped. Let me, before we get right into Russia, let me ask you, since Trump last night became putatively the Republican nominee, and now, I mean, this is a very serious question. Are you seeing trends around the world that reverberate here, but places, whether it be Germany, Austria, England, and we're seeing it here, and how should we get our heads around it?
That's why I had a subtitle for the book, Why Vladimir Putin and the Enemies of the Free World Must Be Stopped.
Yeah.
And I'm always on the side of preventing the rise of Putinism, whether it's in Russia or in this country.
I assume you don't mean that as a joke. I mean, we're serious here.
No, I'm not, I wish it would be a joke. It is not, because, what we're seeing, in this election cycle, it's an attack on American way of life and American democracy from both sides. Economically, from Sanders supporters, reviving the socialism, which is, for me, I was born and raised in a communist country. It sounds like anathema. I had, a few blogs about it. It's because people simply forgot what socialism was, and they just don't realize that the luxury of talking about socialism is paid by the success of capitalism. Yeah, and on the other side, you have, of course, the rise of Donald Trump, and that's attacks on liberty. So, and the fact is that in both parties you have very, very powerful trends that are just pushing it to the opposite sides, sort of creating not a consensus, but rather than a very conflicting field. It worries me, because when I wrote the book, and I hope that the publisher could actually manage to make it available by the end of October, early November last year, because I thought it would contribute to a debate, a serious debate. Recently I watched again this Nixon-Kennedy debate, so 1960. So when candidates could disagree on means, but they agree on goals. They're Americans talking about the future of this great country and what they can do, maybe differently, to promote this country's interests. And now I'm afraid we'll be entering a very different kind of debate, where substance will be totally, trumped by presence.
You talk in your book about the fall of the Berlin Wall, and then every subsequent policy since then has somehow led to the rise of Putin. Explain that.
Oh, I'm not very happy, just to play this blame game, because obviously, if something went wrong, you can always find, who and what, prevented you from succeeding. And definitely, since, Russia failed to rise to the expectations we all had in August 1991, after the collapse of the Berlin Wall and the end of communism in the Soviet Union, the end of Cold War, our failure, simply means that something went wrong, and I don't want just to spread the blame all over the place, saying we were beyond any criticism. But I think it's very important today, especially in this audience, just to talk about mistakes that were made by the free world, especially by this country that in 91, 92 was in a position to reshape the geopolitical affairs. And this is something that I think it's important, to understand, because now we are entering sort of a new phase, and unless it's my professional professional chess player speaks to you. So unless we look back and analyze the moves we made and to understand what mistakes we made and why from having a very, very good position, actually totally winning position, we are now in the position of great uncertainty. So we will never find the right plan. I think this is the mistake number one is that there was no strategy in place. 1991-92 was a time where America could lead the free world into just a new era, but strategy means that you have a long-term plan. And I have to admit that I share the same optimism as Francis Fukuyama, and his book, The End of History, was a best-selling book, not for a good reason, because everybody thought that's over, the liberal democracy has won. But now we know that evil doesn't go away. It could be buried for a while in the rubble of the Berlin Wall, but eventually it sprouts out.
Was the expansion of NATO a mistake?
No, absolutely not. I think this is a myth spread by Putin's propaganda, and in my view, it was the contrary. There were many moments where Clinton administration could actually prevent us from having problems that we are facing today. For instance, the Iranian nuclear program. Very few people remember that in 1995, Congress passed a bipartisan resolution authorizing the President of the United States to cut financial aid to Russia unless the first transfer of nuclear technology to Iran will not be halted. And Clinton decided against putting pressure on Yeltsin. Yeltsin smiled, hugged him, and it moved away. So, and same with North Korea. So there was a disastrous nuclear deal in 1994. So again, it's very difficult, just to put all the blame on the administration. I guess because we're acting like Monday morning quarterbacks. We know exactly what was wrong. But there's something that I think it's important to remember, that is, strategy is a really strong, powerful weapon of democracies. Dictators cannot afford strategy. They always play tactical games. It's all about survival. It's all about just surviving today, maybe tomorrow morning. Democracy should rely on lasting institutions, and it's very important that people who are in charge, they will be making moves that could bring benefits after they leave the office. And this is something that that was missed in the 90s. And in the book, I was also looking back to the beginning of the Cold War. And I think it's very important to remember, what was done in this country in mid-40s, where Truman's administration built almost all the institutions that became staples of winning the Cold War 4 decades later. I think now it's again important to start making these long-term plans, recognizing that unless America assumes its leadership position again and shows some kind of a vision, because you need a vision, you need a strategy to attract people, especially young people around the world. We'll be on the losing side, because even the most barbarian and horrific ideas, they will win the fight for minds and souls if you have only status quo as the alternative.
Well, you went back to the 90s and you talked about Clinton's hugging of Yeltsin as a way of letting Russia not have to do certain things in Iran. I think it was your fellow chess player at a much lower level who was the Russian hand there, Shrub Talbot. And, he was somebody who felt very strongly that bringing Yeltsin into the fold would be the right way to go.
No, but it's not about doing one against another. So it's about combining them. I think there were too many carrots, and it's very important that today, just to point out that people keep talking about NATO expansion, but it means that we want to write off the sort of moral component of foreign policy, which was a very important element of victory in the Cold War. How can you tell Estonians, Latvians, Lithuanians today that it was a mistake expanding NATO? If not for NATO, the Russian tanks would be rolling on the streets of Tallinn, Vilnius, and Riga. So you have Poles, you have other Eastern Europeans that that had this genetic memory, of Russian invasion and living under Soviet occupation. And today NATO is, I'm not sure it's adequate protection, but at least it offers them a chance to resist the threat from Putin.
Is there some truth to the Putin apologist argument that bringing Ukraine closer and closer to Europe across the line a bit, and Ukraine should have remained middle ground?
I think that's the language of buffer state is an insult for 45 million Ukrainians. This is not about America bringing Ukraine. This is a Putin's language. This is about Ukrainian people selecting their future, and they're overwhelmingly voting for Ukraine joining Europe. It's again, the language of buffer state is the 19th or 20th century. This is what Putin wants to sell. And this is the moment we talk his language, we concede the ground. We're in 21st century. And Ukrainians, they fought bravely, they fought really hard against a Russian invasion, and saved their statehood. Because Putin's goal, if you listen to what he said after annexation of Crimea, was to destroy Ukraine as a state. He looked at 8 Ukrainian regions as the part of what they called Novorossiya, New Russia. And he ended up with just a very very part of Donbass, and failed to take over 90% of the territory that he coveted.
Should we have pushed back when he took over the Crimea? It's not an open war. It's a Cold War atmosphere. And when people say, "Oh, we should not do anything to bring the Cold War back," you may not be interested in the war, but the war is interested in you. Yeah. So what Putin did, had dramatic consequences, and it's, in my view, way beyond Ukraine, Crimea, or even Europe. It was the first annexation of a territory of a neighboring country since 1945. Okay, set aside Saddam Hussein, Kuwait. Yeah, that's already, just tells you how bad it is. Yeah. But also, there was something in that made situation worse. Because in 1994, Ukraine was forced, it's important, was forced by this country, by Clinton's administration, and also by the Brits, to give up its nukes. And very few people can remember how big was Ukrainian nuclear arsenal. Nearly 2,000 warheads. Big.
It's bigger than UK, France, and China combined. The third largest nuclear arsenal in the world. If they kept at least part of that, I don't think Putin would ever cross Ukrainian border. So the memorandum signed by Ukrainians, Yeltsin, and also by Americans and Bill Clinton and John Major, guaranteed Ukraine territorial integrity and protection against any aggression in exchange for giving up these nukes. Of course, it was not legally binding. But still, if you have a signature of the United States president on a document, whether it's legally binding or not, we have to admit the fact that by reneging on its obligations, sends a message that, okay, all bets are off. We can start, renegotiating the borders, and the stronger country, more powerful country, will always have an upper hand in doing so. It sends also a message, to other countries. Will Japan or South Korea still rely on American, on American protection, nuclear umbrella, facing not just North Korea but also China, that is far more formidable enemy than Putin's Russia, after what's happened in Ukraine. And I don't think it will take long for Japan or South Korea to get nukes if they
especially since Trump says they should.
Oh yeah. So this is, and then we look at the Middle East. It's just Putin's goal, and he's quite successful in simply stocking cows, because he reached a point. His dictatorship reached a point where economy no longer offers him any excuse of staying in power indefinitely. So he needs an argument, and there's only one argument. You run out of enemies inside the country, you look for enemies elsewhere, and creating chaos, creating conflicts, starting wars, even so far local wars, helps him and his domestic propaganda to sort of promote the image of Putin the invincible, Putin the white knight, protecting Mother Russia against global evil, because our country is surrounded by enemies. And unfortunately, it's like with a drug user. They need bigger and bigger injection, because they have to sell the story.
Well, what about the argument that it sated him getting the Crimea as opposed to embolden him to go further?
Look, it's. I think it's well. I'm not. I'm quite afraid to make direct parallels, but still, it's before Sochi Olympics. I said in the interview, and I remember the Canadian journalist who interviewed me. She jumped on his chair when I said it could embolden Putin the way it emboldened Hitler in 1936. How can you compare Putin to Hitler? So it's wrong, decent people cannot afford it. I said, wait a second. We're not talking about Hitler from history books. We're talking about Hitler from 1935, 1936, 1937, 1938. Read Toronto Star, London Times, Le Monde, New York Times, and okay, in 1938 Hitler was on the cover of Time magazine. Somehow, Olympic Games, they always, they're pushing the adrenaline for a dictator. Right. So it took 20 months for Hitler to annex Austria after Berlin Olympics. It took 20 days for Putin to annex Crimea after Sochi. Yeah. I think he has been preparing for it. So this is the way Russians took over Crimea, and it was so well organized that I have no doubt that the plan has been prepared in advance. I guess, this is my educated guess, I'm speculating, that they prepared this kind of operation for 2015 because the presidential elections were scheduled in Ukraine, and Yanukovych most likely would, not more. He could be losing. And then I think Putin looked at the electoral map of Ukraine, and then they had a plan of annexing Crimea and starting this Novorussia plan, because that's where the most of the voters supporting Yanukovych, they live. So, but since, the Maidan, happened, all of a sudden, and Yanukovych was overthrown, they pushed Crimean plan. They did it, instantly, just in 3 weeks, which is quite amazing that few days before the so-called referendum in Crimea, many people in this country, they were saying, no, Putin would never annex Crimea.
Right.
And I know the list of things that Putin will never do, it's quite long. And he already did it. It's growing longer and longer. So
would he have annexed the rest of Ukraine had there not been pushback?
No, he was pushed back not by the West. I mean, actually, I think he was pushed back by Ukrainian people. I think the biggest mistake he made is that, and he realized it, is that he expected, I think from the reports he received, is that ethnic Russians in Ukraine would be embracing invading troops because they all wanted to live, in Russia. What's happened? Most of them, again, I don't know the exact percentage, 70, 80%, but definitely overwhelming majority of ethnic Russians in Ukraine, instead of supporting Putin, join Ukrainian army. When you look at the demographics of the war in eastern Ukraine, it's more likely a Russian civil war than the Russian-Ukrainian war, because so many of the soldiers there are the ethnic Russians. Right. Yeah, it's just, if you want to look at it from the historical perspectives, you may call it sort of the final showdown between Muscovite Russia, which is the succeeded traditions of Golden Horde and Byzantium, and the Kiev Russia, which was part of this, of European, European tradition. Yeah. So and Putin realized that pushing forward would be too costly. It's it was very clear that advancing to Kiev would bring too many body bags to Russia, and he remembered Afghanistan, and that could be too damaging for his position in Russia, since the war was not as popular as he thought.
Right. I just want to give a plug for Aspen Institute Kiev, which was started about a year ago in reaction to all this, because we have Aspen Institute partners around the world. And we sometimes prioritize places where if we go in, we can make a bit of a difference in keeping a toehold of Western values in a place. So next time you're in Kiev, we hope you'll go to it.
Yeah, I was in Kiev twice, in the last couple of years. Actually, Ukrainians, they even published my book, a compilation of my articles. Right. 30 plus articles since 2001, and also Ukraine is one of the countries. Actually, most of the Eastern European countries published the book. Winter is coming. Ukraine is one of them. So I might be, signing, book copies in Chrestiatic.
Well, it shows that the world, even though it looks messy, is getting slightly better. If you're going to be able to be signing copies of this book in Ukrainian.
Yes, it's the look. My first book was actually published in Russian before it was published in Ukrainian, because there's so many people who read Russian. And again, I think it's it sounds a bit like a paradox, but I believe that most of the talk shows, political talk shows in Ukraine, they are conducted in Russian.
That's right. Well, what do you think his hunger might be for next, and what should we do to stop him?
Oh, again, let's agree that that the man has no strategy, long-term strategy, because dictators simply cannot afford it. He always should look at his back. So there's also danger. Yeah, it's what is important for Putin, and I'm sure he is street smart, as every dictator, mafia boss. He knows that looking strong is most important. So it's looking strong. He may not be strong, but it's very important people perceive him as being very strong. So that's why he has to create conflicts and to look victorious in these conflicts. So that's why after failing in Ukraine, and he realized he failed in Ukraine because he made big promises, he couldn't fulfill them. He looked elsewhere. Actually, I could take a little bit of credit because I said he would not go to Baltics, he would not go to Kazakhstan. I said he would go south. I thought Azerbaijan, Georgia. He went south, but much further south. To Syria. Yeah. Again, it's just, he's of course, as every successful dictator, he's opportunistic. He just realized that in Syria, part of some strategic benefits, of restoring Russian influence there, maybe selling weapons, he could actually help his Iranian allies, and he could protect Assad. He realized that Assad was very important for him to look strong, because at the end of the day, dictator looks strong when he is opposing somebody who is very powerful. So, if you listen to Russian propaganda, it's not about Russia, fighting Ukrainians. It's fighting Ukrainians who are puppets of the United States. When a Russian plane was shot by the Turkish military jets, it was all the Russian press was about Erdogan following orders from Washington, and they didn't even talk to Erdogan. Again, they pretended that they were talking to the United States. So Assad is something, it's a best asset for Putin's propaganda, because 5 years ago, unless I'm wrong, 5 years ago, Obama said Assad must go. And Putin said, Assad is still there. Mm-hmm. And that shows that Putin could defy America. Defying United States president is golden, because it shows that he's so powerful, and it's, that nobody can challenge him from within. And expecting that oligarchs, military men inside Russia or Russian middle class, they could rise against a dictator who is so powerful, so confident that he could defy President of the United States, it's a bit naive. So that's why Putin will be looking for new opportunities to create these conflicts. I doubt that he will go to the Baltics yet. Again, nothing, nothing is impossible. He does have allergy for blood. He can go anywhere if he thinks it serves him. But I think right now his two biggest expectations, they are not military. One is Brexit. Mm-hmm. Obviously, Russian propaganda. That, by the way, they were mourning the day when Scotland voted yes, because they wanted, just something to collapse. Divided Europe is his dream. So I believe Putin's cronies were behind the referendum in Holland that voted against, not affiliation, but it's a trade agreement with Ukraine. And you could see Putin's fingerprints all over the place. Syrian refugees have been weaponized to help Putin's allies in Europe, ultranationalist groups across the continent. Now, Brexit is a big hope, because Brexit, if it happens, I hope not, it will weaken Europe, and it will help Putin to make his argument that sanctions to be lifted, because he needs sanctions to be lifted. And now his biggest hope, Donald Trump. It's no doubt about it. It's just to understand how much Russian propaganda has been promoting Trump. You can just simply look at the polls conducted about a couple of weeks ago, maybe 2-3 weeks ago. It's among people in G20 countries. So the Hillary versus Trump. In 19 countries, Hillary won, and in most of them with double digits. There's only one country that preferred Trump with overwhelming advantage, Russia. So Putin will do absolutely everything he can to help Trump, because this is the way to weaken American democracy, and to basically ruin transatlantic alliance. So that's why I think for the next 4 or 5 months he'll concentrate on just a more KGB type operations. And let's not forget, he's not a military dictator. He's a KGB guy. As long as he can do things, just underground, sort of in the shadow, he would rather do that instead of the sort of direct military assault.
What do you think he would do to help Trump?
Whatever he can. Again, he has no allergy to blood. What can help Trump to win?
October surprise.
October surprise. What? 9/11?
I wouldn't go there.
You wouldn't go there. I mean, as I say, this remember, it's for Putin. It's all about survival. So if nothing changes, and if the sanctions stays, he probably will run out of money in 18 to 24 months.
Do you think Trump would take the sanctions off?
Trump, nobody knows what Trump will do. I think Trump doesn't know what he will do. Yes, Trump is inconsistent. Trump is chaotic. That's what Putin needs. He needs chaos. Trump means chaos. Even if he tries to be, too aggressive, that's good for Putin. Because Trump will alienate European allies, Trump, it cannot be unifier. So that's what Putin needs. It's not necessarily that Trump will be his friend. He might get mad of him and just, he might shoot a Russian plane that is just buzzing American warships. But again, that's good. So this is anything dramatic, provocative, and outrage that Trump does will help Putin because stoking chaos is his main hope.
Do you think there's some simpatico personality there?
Probably yes, and it's the. Trump, probably sees Putin as a strong man, and just, he wants to look like Putin, and act like Putin. And I think Putin's evaluation of Trump, I think, is more precise because he sees Trump as a prey. Putin is a very good poker player. That's why, again, when I hear phrases like Putin plays chess, Obama plays checkers. I get annoyed because I want to defend the integrity of my game. Dictators don't play chess because chess is the 100% transparent game. You can see this everything on the board. 100% available information. Okay, you don't know what your opponent thinks, how he or she could hurt you, but at least you understand the tools that will be used to win the game. Now, in poker, it doesn't matter. Okay, it does matter, but it's not vital whether you have a strong hand or a weak hand. You can have a weak hand, a pair of five, but if you know how to bluff, if you have good nerves, and you have a lot of money to raise the stakes, you can win. Especially if your opponent is willing to fold cards with a full house. Mm-hmm. So Putin did it well. Now with Trump, the game, I think it will be also in Putin's favor because again, it's this Trump. He thinks that it's everything, it's a kind of New York real estate deal. It will be quite different, and I think again, it's just he's too erratic, and Putin knows how to use it. So that's why Putin, and by the way, other thugs in the world, they are just they're waiting for President Trump, because again, that will add unpredictability to American foreign policy, which means that one of the greatest advantages of the free world, which is the long-term strategy, just will be abandoned. From Harry Truman to Ronald Reagan, U.S. foreign policy was quite predictable. There were fluctuations, but within range. Now, since the end of the Cold War, it was very much like pendulum swinging from one side to another. Clinton did too little, W did too much, Obama has been doing nothing. So it's the. But Trump will just, he'll break the pendulum. And that's what is being expected by Putin and other thugs in the world, because they could see that, again, no more rules. Yeah, you can go here, you can go there. So, and it's the core values and the pillars of security in Europe and in the world, like, the borders and other things, they will be just thrown away.
Let's unpack Syria for a moment, because you brought it up. What happens there is the red line, as you mentioned, walking away from the red line, but Russia coming in almost with a lifeline, at least Lavrov and maybe Putin, saying, okay, we'll handle the chemical weapons, you don't have to do what you said. And then I think, I don't speak for this administration, a sense in the administration that we actually shared quite a few interests with Russia in Syria, as opposed to having conflicting interests. Was that all a mistake on the Obama administration's part?
Look at the results. Let's have this mental experiment. September 2013, Assad uses chemicals against his own people. And Europeans are all, they're all getting shaky. They didn't want, any intervention, no war. So you go to a European leader. Let's start with Angela Merkel. And you show them fantasy. You show them the pictures, the images, the videos of 2016. Of million or more refugees, floating to Europe, Syria just it's ablaze, just everything in flames, carpet bombing, terrorist attacks. And you tell them, look, you can avoid it. You sign a check for 100 billion euros for Americans to take on Assad, and nothing will happen. In a heartbeat, I'm sure she will sign it just to avoid this conflict. Yeah. The problem with this, with what's happened in the Middle East in 2013 or in 2011. It's that, there are no easy solutions. But, if you keep saying it's difficult, eventually it becomes impossible. Yeah, and of course it was a mistake. It was not just a mistake, that because Assad stayed in the office. It was a mistake because it sent a signal to both American friends and allies, long-term allies, and foes alike, that America was no longer a player. So by doing so, actually by doing nothing, this administration has created a vacuum. The problem is the vacuum doesn't stay vacuum for too long. So it's being filled. And who has filled this vacuum? Iran, Russia, and of course all sorts of terrorists. And we should remember that this is this old game, a classical game by a dictator. To look good, you have to create something which is much worse. So ISIS, Daesh, whatever, ISIL, no matter how you name it, this is Assad's excuse for staying in power. It's not accidental that there were some of the Russian banks have been exposed in facilitating the illicit oil trade between Assad and ISIS. And when I have some images from territories controlled by Islamic State, one question I always have is, if they use mobile phones, who is the provider? Mm-hmm. Just tell me. Someone has to provide, the services. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and sometimes I suspect the service comes from Damascus.
Right. Well, all right. I'm going to ask one question on a totally different topic, and then we'll open it up here. But the topic is chess and Big Blue and artificial intelligence. And at one point, you were beaten in the contest by the IBM machine, which in some ways was not, with all due respect to chess, all that surprising. It's a rules-driven game, and eventually some machine's going to be able to crunch through billions of games and billions of patterns. But then you did something interesting, if I remember correctly. I think I wrote about it, and you certainly did, which is you decided to have a machine and a human compete against the best machines or the best humans. What did you learn from all that experience about machine learning and artificial intelligence?
Let me start by saying that chess is a mathematically infinite game.
Yeah.
So it's the number of all legal moves is 10 power 45. So that's out of question that any machine can crunch it just to the very end. So we're not going to see a moment when machine plays, the first move e2, e4 and declares mate in 15,755 moves. It's not going to happen. Okay. So is the now, but of course, machines are just dominant today, mainly because they play a steady game. This is one of the biggest problems of humans facing machines, whether it's in chess or in Go now, because we all are well vulnerable. So we can play a very, very good game, but still, you'll find few inaccuracies there. So mistake is something that is inevitable, especially when we're reaching the winning position. So it's complacency. So the quality of chess played by two humans at the highest level will not require the same precision that is required to play against a computer. So that's why psychologically humans, even I'm talking about the world champions or players from the very top, they are doomed against the machine. So now you mentioned Deep Blue and artificial intelligence, but I mean Deep Blue had nothing to do with artificial intelligence. It was IBM, a successful project of parallel processors. It had 256 processors. Each of them was a mini computer. Each made about 1.5 million positions per second. And the sort of the experiment was to maximize the effect. So 256, so to have something, like 150 to 100 million positions per second, during the game. So to reach this 30-40% return of the overall processing power. If you look at IBM computers, successful experiments, Watson, it was much closer to artificial intelligence. Mm-hmm. It actually worked in Jeopardy, and it's already era of uncertainty. And Deep Blue, you may call it the hardware project, while Watson was a software project. Now AlphaGo, if we look at now at it, that's something that becomes it's as close as possible to artificial intelligence, because it's a
that was the machine that won the game in Go.
Against the world champion in Go. Because it's a self-learning computer. But there are a lot of problems now, just with the self-learning machines, because basically, you put up the rules inside, here are the rules, and then machine can play a billion games by just going around, and eventually coming up with an algorithm. The problem is that if machine is bugged, so how are you going to find it? So technically with Deep Blue, it's if you have a few thousand years, at your disposal, you can put every move that Deep Blue made, the rationale on paper, because there's an algorithm. Now, with this self-learning machine, so if something goes wrong, how are you going to find it? So I think that now we are reaching the point where there are so many new interesting questions being raised. So, and it's not just about artificial intelligence, but it's about the way that we are just we are going to accommodate it in our world. The robots now are no longer threatening just blue-collar jobs. Now they're threatening white-collar jobs. So, and that's quite an interesting effect. And I just run an interesting test, on my social, on my Facebook. Though it's taking this just for example the self-driving cars. So this self-driving cars. Let's say it's an accident. It's inevitably going to hit another car. So the choice is you hit a bus, and it could lead to your demise, or you hit a car with family of four. So are you, how your machine is programmed? For greater good or for your own safety? Now, don't think that is a simple question. People say, you can program it, fine. Now, what happens with the insurance business? No, just start here.
Interesting.
Just immediately, the next question. So this is, it's because uncertainty is such an important element of our life. So that's why trying to eliminate it could create actually more uncertainty. So now, and going back to your question about man plus machine, I immediately thought after my second match with Deep Blue in 1997. Actually, I won the first match, so just
yep.
Yes. Yes, fair to say. Yes. That is, trying to actually bring together human intuition and a brute force of calculation. I mean, could be very beneficial, because we could actually we could guide the machine, and we could avoid some of the mistakes, the typical mistakes made by human. For instance, when you have two centaurs, human plus machine versus human plus machine playing each other. So if you reach winning position, you will never make a mistake because you switch to the computer, you don't have to intervene, so the machine will just carry it through.
Machines are better at in-game.
Not in-game, just a winning position. When it's technical, so you can just minimize or actually almost eliminate chances for making mistakes. And I understand that now in many businesses now, it's especially related to the internet security. The man plus machine combination becomes vital, because it gives you a competitive edge if you know how to maximize the effect of bringing the best of two worlds together.
So you have a symbiosis, sort of the strengths of human intuition and the strengths of the algorithms process.
Yeah, it's a human. It's when you look at at computer, if you know how to deal with all this data, so and you can you can help machine. I don't know just whether it's the right phrase, but you can guide the machine by actually selecting the move, or just so the direction that you think could be most productive, because actually you could see some of the other lines, and you can evaluate at the end of this horizon, you can evaluate your chances. there's no guarantee you will not make a mistake, but I think the combination, statistically, it will give you an edge.
Personally, when you played with a machine, I mean, not against a machine, but in partnership with the machine against whatever other team, did that free you up psychologically to do it differently?
Oh, I didn't play too much because it was at the end of my professional career. But we have many games played, it's in what I call advanced chess. The interesting thing is that it's this. We know that statistically, it was proven beyond any doubt. A strong player with a computer, with a good computer, easily beats the most powerful machine. Yeah. Just it's one-sided because again, as I said, it's just, he avoids blunders, and then when he reaches the winning position, he can switch to the computer mode. But we had we saw something that's I couldn't predict, that two relatively weak players with three computers, average computers, actually beat a strong player with a computer, because they knew how to maximize the effect of using the power of three computers. So it's a process actually, just it's became more important, dominant in the game.
So that's why machine learning and artificial intelligence will always be a more complex topic than some people say it is.
Oh no,
there'll be room for us in the mix.
Oh no, I'm sure there'll be plenty of room. We just have to understand, that it's going to happen. Yeah. I mean, we just have to probably, just depart from this dystopian view, the Terminator. So it's like weather, it's changing, and we can complain or we can take an umbrella if it's raining.
Yes, sir.
Should I wait for the mic?
You can shout. It'll.
Mr. Kasparov, could you look at the death of Mr. Nemtsov, the rise of Mr. Kadyrov, and to the extent that we could apply chess terms to world leaders as states, what state or world leader would you consider to be either a king, a queen, a bishop, or a pawn? Thanks.
Me?
Well, the death of Nemtsov, let's start there.
It was a murder. I think there's quite a difference. Mm-hmm. He was murdered, and some would say it was execution in front of Kremlin, just to send a message. It's a chilling message to anybody who still lives in Russia or outside that going against Putin and blasting him the way Boris did, heroically, some say, not very wisely, because attacking on a regular basis the mafia boss, who was not ready to accept any criticism. I mean, that was very challenging. Now, the rise of Kadyrov is not accidental because there are very little doubts left. So I have to respect the presumption of innocence, but we see overwhelming evidence of Kadyrov's people being involved and conducting this murder. And the fact is that Kadyrov is still there and actually even given extra powers by Putin tells you that regime now is relying on the most brutal elements from within, and Putin's henchmen like Kadyrov, they're gaining more and more power. It's a bad sign because it tells you about more violence, but it's also a good sign because it shows that the support for the regime is shrinking. So Putin doesn't trust even some of his old buddies from KGB, because we could see that by creating the so-called National Guard, which is, by the way, quite funny. They created National Guard that brought together the most capable fighting units from interior forces, interior police, and also other special forces. And Putin appointed the former head of Kremlin security as the commander of this most powerful army in Russia, nearly 400,000, kind of Praetorian Guard. And a week later, they thought, oh, National Guard sounds too American. They called it the Russian Guard. It's a tiny thing that it just shows the paranoia of the regime. As for the chess pieces, my problem of just bringing these chess metaphors is that we always play chess, game of chess, following the rules, and there are no rules in Putin's Russia. We know that the rules can be bent when Putin thinks it's convenient. So that's why, again, I wish eventually we could be, we will be in the position to play anything that remotely looks like the game of chess.
Yeah, he's more of a hunter and stalker.
Whatever.
When you talk about these thuggery going on, I think and you're close to Bill Browder, who's been a fellow at the Aspen Institute, and what's happened to him, right?
Okay, it's what's happened to Magnitsky. I mean, sometimes Bill was lucky that he could escape. Yes, so but that's typical story, and it's also quite interesting that in the Panama Gate, in this whole Panama Papers, this is where the $2 billion fortune of Russian musician has been disclosed. In many companies, shell companies that he controlled, I think one of them, at least one of them, sort of had connections to money that was stolen, and the money that actually Magnitsky found. That was stolen from Russian treasury and disappeared in these offshore jungles.
Yes, sir. I'm sorry, we have a lot of questions. I'll get to them.
This morning, the Russian defense minister announced the deployment of 3 divisions in the West. And the reason apparently is to oppose additional NATO troops that have been put in the East. And the U.S., as I understand it, has plans to deploy a brigade to help the West in November. What should the West do against this move?
During my book tour, I crossed this country, so I had a cellar tour, the Midwest tour, the West Coast tour, and I was in the Midwest. I visited St. Louis, Missouri, Kansas City, Missouri, and Chicago. And in Kansas City, of course, I visited
the Truman Library.
Of course, Truman Library in Independence. What shocked me there is that it's the beginning of the Cold War, and it's a presidential library, Harry Truman's library, and they offer the moral equivalence to the arguments of the Americans and Soviets. I mean, as if that's what Stalin said about potential threats was not refuted. It was a lie. Today we know it's a lie. And it's the fact is that there's still attempts to play this moral equivalence, and it just simply denies the fact that you are not dealing with people that are just abiding the same rules. Now, same story. Oh, Russia is making an announcement that it's trying to sort of match up American buildup. By 2013, there was not a single American tank in Europe. That's a fact. So that NATO was not a threat. I mean, NATO was depleted. So now, how can you ignore the demands or the pleads, the Baltic states pleading, and Poles also for protection? And it's clear that if Putin decides to cross the border, he will overrun Baltics, even with NATO, in a few days, maybe in a couple of weeks. That's why I think the answer is not simply sending troops there, because at the end of the day, you don't want to start an open war. It's very important to restore the confidence, and I think this confidence is being lost. The Poles have plenty of resources. I think they can, if the Poles, the Baltic states, if they all realize, that America is, sort of has assumed the leadership role again, it will change the climate, the atmosphere. So far, there's no confidence, and having brigade there, which is not ready to fight, could be counterproductive. It's not this.
But it is a tripwire.
I don't know. People are scared there. I tell you this. I had a very strange experience about 6 months ago in Finland. I was one of the guest speakers at the Nordic Business Forum in Helsinki, and in the morning they actually asked me to speak to the VIP group about Putin and Russia, which was quite surprising because normally Finns, they were restrained, that they didn't want to talk about politics. But at that time, it was different, and it was very successful. There were about 700 people. This big, the long Q&A. It's almost ovation. And propelled by this success, at the main session facing 5,000 people, I decided just to make a joke. So it's the about 60% of this audience Finns, 10% Estonians, some Latvians, Norwegians, some Russians. And again, I thought it would be nice, just to make a joke. So, nice to be here in Helsinki. Oh, by the way, last night Russian television called Finland northwestern part of the Greater Russia.
Not a lot of laughter.
For 5 seconds, I was biting my nails, and I said, not a single laughter, not a single laughter. I said, I probably have to apologize because looking at the faces of people, I probably caused a few heart attacks. That's what people feel there. But by the way, now Finland is about to have a referendum on joining NATO. So it's this, and Sweden probably will follow. So Putin has changed the dynamics there, and again, nothing will get better unless people actually not only in these countries but also in Russia will realize that America is serious.
Yes, sir. Right there, and then right there, and then right there, and there, and that'll end it. So no more questions, please.
Mr. Kasparov, you mentioned the South Caucasus. What are your thoughts on the Nagorno-Karabakh conflict and what role Russia might have in it and its resolution or non-resolution, as it were?
It's quite a tragic story, and it's somehow connected to my personal life. I was born and raised in Baku, so it was among 250,000 Armenians that had to leave the city. I'm afraid that this conflict has no resolution in the nearest future because no party of the conflict, including Russia, has any interest of finding a solution. To the contrary, the Nagorno-Karabakh conflict sort of provides legitimacy to the regime in Baku, regime in Yerevan, and also helps Moscow to play both cards in the region. On the Azeri side, Aliyev's regime, it's like a monarchy. So they need Karabakh as a reminder that Azerbaijan must spend money just to the army, and also you can cover corruption and inefficiency of the government there. On the Armenian side, you have it's a bit more democratic, but still it's being ruled by generals from Karabakh that have an interest of keeping Karabakh as the sort of hotspot that provides the rationale for them staying in power and basically suppressing democracy in Armenia. And also, Russia probably controls Armenia now, it's right, left, and the center. So most of Armenian industries are bought by Russian oligarchs. And from Putin's perspective, it's perfect because no one else can actually push the buttons there and pull the strings. He can, it's actually Medvedev, who is just not probably the smartest man on the planet. So he just made it very clear after visiting Baku and Yerevan during this conflict, during the last fighting in the region. He said, the best thing we can do is to sell more weapons to Yerevan and Baku. Because if we don't do it, somebody else will. Mm-hmm. So that's why we'd better do it, under our, it will be under our control. So my view is that this conflict will go on, and just actually yesterday or day before yesterday, I saw news that in Armenian parliament there was a resolution on the floor about recognizing Karabakh, which could actually start another fighting there. Again, Putin has an interest of making sure that the conflict doesn't go away, and who knows? It may be in flames soon. Also, don't forget that in October there will be an election in Georgia, the Republic of Georgia, and Putin could have legitimate worries about. It's not a pro-Moscow regime, but it's a relatively friendly regime compared to Saakashvili's government. So if they will be on the verge of losing elections, which might happen, so I will not be surprised for just another row of the Russian attack.
We're nearing the end, so let us try to do it quickly here and a couple of others, yes.
Thank you very much. You said that, in your view, Obama has done nothing. You also talked about the lack of confidence among Eastern European countries. And then you also said that sending a brigade as a response to some of the Russian aggression could be counterproductive. If you're in the Oval Office this afternoon, what are the 3 concrete things America could do in terms of its current foreign policy, along with its allies, that would make a difference? Concrete things.
You know, it's what I hate most is when, people, after many years, doing the wrong things, they say, now what do we do now? The answer is nothing. Because this is the only thing America can do is just to use the credibility of the Oval Office. And it has none today. So that's why it's very realistic. Because at the end of the day, you don't want to start a war. And the credibility helps you to make a threat, a credible threat that, scares bad guys. So if you don't have credibility, you can make threats. If Obama, just makes another threat, unfortunately, he will have to proceed because nobody will stop. So I'm afraid that right now there's very little America can do. Again, I said it's sending troops there is counterproductive because from Putin's perspective is an empty gesture. I don't know how you can, restore the credibility of the Oval Office and this country in the world, but it's probably about, right now, it's time to start thinking what will happen in 5, 10, 15 years. That's what I said in the beginning. It's about strategy, to start strategizing. It's a long-term vision that has to be offered, and maybe this administration still has a chance of laying down the agenda. Okay, there's many things they're done wrong, but now blaming Obama, blaming Bush 43, blaming Clinton, blaming Bush 41. I mean, you can always find someone to blame, but it's very important that America has to restore its adherence to the credible, consistent foreign policy. And it's, by the way, it's a debate, not for me just to have. I have a Russian passport. I'm a Croatian citizen. I have a green card. I'm legal in this country. And I pay taxes.
Yes, sir.
But it's for Americans to actually decide whether you have stomach, whether you have interest of leading the world. It's not about America being world policeman. It's about global leadership. And if America decides that you'd rather rebuild Fortress America, if you go back to America first, relying on 2 giant oceans protecting you against, the global evil, that's your choice. Just to remember that, 19 terrorists in 9/11 killed more Americans than the entire Japanese fleet in Pearl Harbor 60 years earlier.
Mm-hmm. Yes, sir.
You spoke about President Obama's weak actions in Crimea and how it emboldened Putin to go to Syria. Just in the past 2 weeks in Aleppo, we've seen the worst violence in a long time in the war. And according to the Syrian Network for Human Rights, Putin has launched 50 airstrikes in Aleppo. That's Russia, not the Assad regime. But John Kerry 2 days ago said that he hopes that Assad listens to Russia and that Russia can talk to Assad to stop the bombing, seemingly making a difference between the legitimacy of the Russian airstrikes and the Assad regime's airstrikes. Russia quickly said that Assad is targeting terrorists, and so they don't have to talk to him. I just want to know your thoughts on that and what you think we should be doing in Syria right now. Thank you.
I think Kerry should be given credit for helping Russian, Iranians, and Assad troops to regroup. When you look at these negotiations, I'm not sure we can use the word negotiations because that means you give something, you take something. The moment you have Kerry at the table, it's a one-way street. So it's when I see Kerry negotiating with Lavrov, whatever the negotiation means, I'm afraid that if they stay for too long in one room, he could give Alaska back to Russia. Look, Putin has been sending ammunition and jets and even some troops, special troops. Iran has been sending troops, to Syria. And Obama keeps sending John Kerry. So tell me who's calling the shots.
Way back, and I think there was one last question.
Thank you. Maybe I don't understand the situation in Russia, but it seems from all the polling that Putin is a popular guy. Why are democratic instincts and sentiments so weak, and why is Putin so popular among Russian people?
How do you know?
Well, that's what all the polls show.
Excuse me?
Oh, wait, no, I mean, is he popular?
I don't know.
But
I don't
you're
know.
not saying
I don't
he
know.
isn't.
I think it's just, I think it's, it's, I wouldn't call it, it's insulting for my intellect, but just, repeating the same story that a polling in the totalitarian country, or authoritarian country, it could give you an indication what people think about their dear leader. I'm sure if you have a polling now in Damascus, Assad will get 150%.
Well, wait, but there's a good question here, which is he's doing it to retain his popularity. How was that working?
No. Hitler was also very popular in 1939.
Right.
I'm sure Stalin was very popular. So it's the problem is that, it's the polling is an instrument of democracy. You can make polls here and you can predict that, Trump will win Indiana and Bernie will probably, just overcome Hillary in somewhere else, but you can make predictions based on the polling since it's a part of the democratic system. Now, polling in a country where people still have genetic memories of KGB, somebody calls you, and what do you think about Mr. Putin? I'm quite happy to see that about 20% of Russians are still, saying we did like him. So if you want to rely on any polling, in a country like Russia, you should look at the polls that do not have names in it. For instance, what Russians think about economy and their living standards. 79% say they don't like it. Because this is something that doesn't require them just to be brave or to hide their feelings. They could. Now, regarding Putin, yes, I'm sure he has plenty of support. It's the Crimea was working for him. But what is the real support? I don't know. But if you are so confident, why do you need 400,000 people, united in a National Guard, Russian Guard, whatever it is? And the next day, the parliament awarded this new Praetorian Guard rights to shoot the crowd without a warning. If you have 86% support, do you have to surround Russia, the main television station with barbed wire? I don't think so. So this is probably something we don't know. Again, I don't want to speculate because it's all this polling is for me it's a big question mark. Yeah, and when people say he will win the elections no matter what, if you have this Democrats running against him, I don't know. What I know that the man has never participated in a single debate in his life. There were no debates in Russia. The first thing Putin did, a part of restoring Soviet anthem, was to stop live transmissions. Since year 2000, there was no live TV in Russia, except 9 o'clock news that, of course, Kremlin controlled. So we don't know how Putin will perform because it's always a monologue. There were no dialogues. And also, if you're so powerful, you have 86% support, why your fierce critic is killed in front of Kremlin? So again, I have my doubts about this level of support. So all dictators, they have 99% support on Sunday, and on Monday, they end up like Gaddafi.
The book is Winter is Coming. It is for sale by Politics and Prose. Mr. Kasparov has said that he would sign them, right?
Absolutely, yes.
And we thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Great. Very good. Thank you.